In this presentation, we'll explore what research is, understanding its processes and different approaches. Also, I will briefly discuss why we should care about research as we work in higher education careers. So, what is research? What terms or images pop up in your head when you hear the word research? Are they words such as question, examination, or investigation? Or interview and survey? Or maybe science labs? Basically, research is the work that we do to find and explain what we want to understand. However, there is a key condition here. The investigation is systematic or scientific. What does that mean? How is it different from other ways of understanding phenomenon? Let's think about it with an example. There has been a perception that high school math course taking, particularly completing Algebra 2 or higher, would make students to go to four-year universities rather than two-year colleges or no college and earn bachelor's degrees. Based on this assumption, many states have implemented graduation requirements that made all high school students to complete advanced math courses. So how do we know that this assumption is good enough to make the decision of curricular requirements? One non or less scientific way of explaining a phenomenon is to rely on what other people, often people with authority, say. For example, you will consider the assumption true because a professor from Harvard University thinks taking Algebra 2 is helpful for going to college. Or you can judge the statement based on your reasoning. You can guess that advanced math courses would give more skills and knowledge for students, and therefore better academic preparedness. This sounds better than the previous one, but maybe someone else will have a counter argument. You can explain the assumption based on your observation or experience. For example, you took Algebra 2 while you were in high school, and you thought that finishing the course did not help you surviving your college coursework. Then you may conclude that the assumption is not true. So why are these approaches problematic? First, the explanation would not be generalizable because the conclusion is made only based on one person's idea or observation. For example, my experience with math and college is based on one public high school in Michigan, and your experience is based on one Catholic school in Arizona, for example. It is difficult to apply our reasoning to students who attend non-religious private schools in California. Explanation might be keep changing as individuals thought about the issue or observation change. It is subjective as the conclusion is drawn from individuals' perception and experience. So the conclusion might be biased. For example, if someone doesn't like mathematics, then this can impact on the conclusion he or she make about the connection between the two factors. Thus, research would explain a phenomenon using scientific methods. This means that the argument will be examined through a set of plan that is laid out and based on empirical data and analysis that is objective, meaning anyone can replicate the plan and will attain the same outcome. So if we wanted to explain the effect of high school math course taking on college outcomes, we have to take a scientific approach by collecting data about students on their levels of high school mathematics and colleges they attended, persisted, graduated, and analyze the data following some procedures. So research takes systematic method. This means that research consists of processes. The first step is to identify a research problem to investigate. Often, people are curious about similar things, and we accumulate knowledge together. If we already know a lot about the research problem that we were interested, we don't have to waste time and resources conducting new research. Instead, we can find answers to our question from existing evidence. Or maybe we realize that we have answers to part of the problem, but still do not know some other parts, then we can focus resources on that area. So we can judge how much we already know and do not know by reviewing the literature. So that'll be the second step. Once we know what to study and what we want to know and accomplish from this research, we will collect the data, analyze and interpret them, and report the findings in relation to the research problem that we started with. There are two paradigms when we conduct a research. One is quantitative methods, and the other is qualitative approach. The two approaches have different focus when we conduct a research, as you can see in this cartoon. Okay, quantitative research focuses on how much things are same or different and understanding relationships between things, such as cause and effect. On the other hand, qualitative research suits to the question of how and why. So the purpose of quant research is to test if the relationship is similar to what we would expect and assumes things are fixed and measurable. For qualitative research, though, a study is to understand and interpret perspectives, extracting meaning of social interactions. And this approach assumes that reality is dynamic and is perceived differently by individuals. Given different purpose of the research, quant methods collect information through a precise, standardized measurement to highlight differences in related dimensions. And those data are analyzed by statistical analysis, and the focus of the analysis is to test how close the hypothesis and findings from the statistical analysis is. The outputs are reported via tables, charts, and graphs. On the other hand, qualitative methods collect from open-ended, unstructured perspective of people. Data are often in the format of words, images earned from documents, observation, and interview. This analysis is to extract themes from the data and create narrative using the language of the research subjects. Another dimension that quantitative and qualitative approaches diverge is that they take different scientific methods. Quant research takes a deductive approach. So the research applies general principles to specific cases, testing a theory with the data. So it is confirmatory or top-down type of research. Meanwhile, qualitative research takes an inductive approach. Researcher generates a new hypothesis and theory from the data collected. So qualitative research is conducted from exploratory or bottom-up approach. Another important term that you will hear often is variables. A variable is often used in quantitative research. The term refers to a measurable characteristic that varies. So if you remember that quant research is interested in how much things are similar or different, variables are the main things that a study is interested in explaining. As a side note, in qualitative research, the equivalent term is central phenomenon. This term refers to the key concept, idea, or process of the research. So going back to the concept of variable, variables are measured and documented in numeric values, but not necessarily measure only degree or amount. So we can distinguish quantitative variables and qualitative variables. Quantitative variables measure how things vary in degree or amount, whereas qualitative variables measure how things vary in terms of type or kind. So let's look at the two pictures here applying these concepts. Are the pictures showing the same things? The answer will be yes if we measure the content as a quant variable, which is the number of bars. So number of bars in each picture is 4, and therefore the pictures are the same. Or the answer would be no if we focus on a qualitative variable, that is the color of the bars. In one picture, the bars are yellow, and in the other picture, the color is blue. So the pictures are different on this qualitative variable. Let's now assume that we are trying to explain individual students' demographic and academic characteristics. So then we will focus on reading test score, college major, marital status, and age. So among those four, what are quantitative variables? Yes, reading test score and age, because they explain how scores and age vary in degree. How about academic major? Yes, it is a qualitative variable because the variable explains how students are in different type of field. Similarly, marital status is also a qualitative variable. Going back to the high school math and college outcomes example, how can we conduct a research to investigate the assumption from a scientific approach? From a quantitative perspective, we can pursue a research question: what is the relationship between math and college entrance and degree attainment? The data can be collected via administrative data such as transcript, and we can create variables such as level of courses student took, college attendance, and degree attainment. We turn them into numerical values and analyze the data using statistics. If we conduct a qualitative research on this topic, we can focus on how students think about the benefit of advanced math courses in relation to the entry to and graduating from college, right? We can interview students by asking relevant questions or collect students' journal about their schooling and curriculum experiences. We will try to understand students' perception by focusing on finding patterns from students' own words and interpretation. So far, we discussed what research is. Now, we understand that research helps us to understand things from a scientific perspective instead of relying on one source or from your own perspective that are subjective to biases. But why should we care about research as we work in the field of higher education? Just like the math course taking example, sometimes decisions that have consequences to our students, staff, and faculty, and other stakeholders are made from non-scientific approach. Let's say a college just decided to implement an online or virtual freshman orientation, removing face-to-face orientation. And the decision is made by a group of top managers who perceive that, orientation is a channel for providing information about school life anyway, and this can be accomplished by a video lecture rather than holding a whole day event. The new change might bring unintended consequences such as students' lack of belongingness to the program or difficulty forming peer networks. Then the school may need to consider change the orientation program again. So the decision without data or research can involve unnecessary trial and error processes, which results in waste of time, resources, or negative consequences. Put it differently, research in our own work context allows us better understand the current issue, search for solutions in a way that minimizes negative consequences. Then we will take action based on our conclusions from research. We can also check the process and outcomes of these policies and practices with data and systematic analysis of those data, and revise what is in practice to improve the status quo. The benefit of data-based decision-making has been recognized only recently in higher education. As Bensimon and her colleagues described in the 2004 article you read, what researchers study and what higher education practitioners do have been separated. In the traditional model, researchers in academia decided what should be studied. The goal of research was often to generate representational knowledge, pretty much about explaining the general trends and testing and expanding theory. In addition, research in traditional model emphasizes sophisticated methodology, which also contributed to the disconnection between researchers and practitioners or research publications and specific institutional contexts. So what the authors tried to demonstrate was the practitioner-as-researcher model which in some sense similar to what we want to accomplish down the road after you complete this capstone course, earn your master's degree in higher education, and work in higher education careers. The major idea is that practitioners can use research to support decision-making and day-to-day practices at their respective institutional contexts. Deviating from the traditional perception of research, the authors found that this practitioner-as-researcher model promoted participation and cooperation of stakeholders as practitioners investigate specific inquiry into their own practices in order to produce knowledge that can serve the particular needs of the community and empower people of that particular community. For the detailed project example, read the article available on the course Blackboard. Okay, so that was a brief introduction to research and discussion of why we need to care about research as higher education practitioners. In the next presentation, we will cover the very first and most important step of a research project, which is defining research topics, problems, and questions. See you there.